Well, hello. This is podcast number 2.
Yes.
For how do you recover from trauma, or is it trauma recovery is possible? I'm not sure on which title it is yet, but it'll be one of them. And this is number 2. And we're excited because we felt like we just begun something in the last one, which we want to continue. So Claire, can you remind us where we got to?
Yes. I think I just asked you a really huge question with like 3 minutes to go, so that wasn't that helpful learning about podcasts. So we'd asked, what would your dream be for society to understand trauma recovery and look at things through that lens? How would that then impact society? And I think you dipped into a few little thoughts, but you thought maybe we could like delve in on a sector.
I can't quite remember what little thoughts I'd already said, so I might repeat myself, but I'll try not to. It would change the whole of the world, actually. And I don't even say that loosely. I think it really, really would.
Yeah, well.
I think every single person is in some way impacted by trauma. You can't escape it, because even if you've had the most perfect world, the perfect childhood, the perfect adult experience, the people around you haven't.
Yeah.
And so you can't escape the fact that we need to understand trauma and the impact of it. So it would change everything. And it would change, I probably said this last time, but it would change our education system. It would completely change our health system. It would change the criminal justice system. And it would change our social care system. The way that we look after people when we understand humans and how humans are impacted by experiences of terror, powerlessness and overwhelm. So there are beginnings to be the beginnings. There are the beginnings of change. And, you know, when I first started writing books about trauma and when I first started the Trauma Recovery Centre, one of the charities, nobody was talking about trauma. And in fact, people were quite shocked that the charity was called Trauma Recovery Centre. They were like, how does that fit in? And a lot of people didn't think it fitted into the mental health system. They saw that they didn't know where it fitted. There was a lot of confusion about it, which surprised me. But as we know, in the last 10 years, things have completely changed. And actually, one of these books was written, I think, 2013 on trauma. That was my first one. And so these have now been out for, some of them, for 10 years. And in that time, we've seen a massive change. So we've got trauma-informed is now a phraseology that's used.
Yeah.
I would argue that lots of people have very different understandings of what that is.
Yeah.
But having a trauma-informed concept is useful, but to have a trauma-informed culture takes a long time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I'm trying to work out what to say in a short amount of time.
Yeah, because so you started the Trauma Recovery Centres in 2011.
Yeah.
So that's 14 years ago.
Yeah.
And I remember you saying at that time people didn't really understand trauma, but now trauma-informed is hugely spoken about. Could you maybe point out what's the difference between trauma-informed and trauma recovery focused?
Yeah, so I guess trauma-informed is being informed about trauma and how it impacts you.
Yeah.
Simple as that. What is trauma? How common is it? What kind of traumas can occur? And how does that impact you on a daily basis?
Yeah.
And then us responding to it. So some people would say it's trauma-informed and then it's trauma-responsive. I don't think you can separate those. I think if you're informed, you are responsive. Because we're responsible as humans in how we interact with each other. I don't think you can go, well, I'm informed, I understand it, and now I'm choosing to ignore that.
Yes.
It's kind of rude, isn't it? It's like if we want to be part of a trauma-informed culture, we're part of it by how we react and how we respond to others. That is a trauma-informed culture. So, you know, little things like emotional connection and being emotionally available for others and being empathetic, it's not just a cognitive knowledge, it's how we show it on our faces, it's how we move across corridors in our staff areas, it's how we treat the people that we're looking after. It's every single tiny interaction we have is either trauma-informed or it's not. There isn't really any neutral.
Yeah, because if you are neutral on your face when someone's not feeling safe, then you don't know where to go with that, do you? Because you're like, how are you going to respond? I can't tell. Whereas even if just someone's warm and receptive on their face. I remember you teaching a lot about that on Zoom as well, of like when we obviously went through the pandemic. You did loads on collective trauma and how we could help people feel safe when we're not in the room together.
And I think, not many people know, but I would say that, I'm looking forward to this summer where I'm not on Zoom. Because arguably, I might cry. I'm actually quite traumatized by people's faces on Zoom. Whereas when we're in a room together and I'm training, it's the energy and the warmth and people's interaction and the ability to put people in little groups. And I would go and visit the groups and I'd sort of kneel down and we'd get involved and they'd ask questions that were so flowing out of them. But also sometimes if I saw people looking at me in a way, if I'm, for example, teaching on how our facial expressions are really important and how if somebody's telling us something really big, we don't want to go in shock, but equally we don't want to look completely like, of course, as if it happens to everyone, because what happened should never have happened. And so our facial expressions are so important. But on Zoom, when you can only see people's faces, when they look completely disinterested or not in any way connected to the teaching, that disconnect is really quite distressing because of the subject matter. And so I love nothing more than face-to-face trainings, and particularly big ones when you get a whole room and you can have people around tables and you see people's nervous system shifting. You see people's just sitting in it and soaking up the environment of being around people that are equally seeking interconnection and human to human vibe.
Amazing. So trauma informed is we're understanding how it impacts a human. We're understanding how to create safety and validate. Trauma recovery then, can you talk about the difference there?
So I would say trauma informed is something that everybody needs to do, and it is coming in increasingly. My one flag I'd wave at that point is quite often people are explaining trauma informed from the lens of type 1 trauma only, and they're not recognizing the complexity of trauma where somebody can't say, no, I've got a trauma history. No, this happened to me. With my continuum in type 2 and 3 trauma, it's unlikely that someone's able to say that. So I'm flying that little flag to say, be careful, because if trauma training, which is trauma-informed training, is too simplified and too simplistic, the only people we're actually going to be trauma-informed for are those who can actually ask for help and say why they need help. And that's leaving the most traumatized people unable to actually ask for help because they can't use words, because neurobiologically they can't use words yet. They're going to need that emotional connection and consistent relationship before they can. So from my perspective, trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive would be the foundation of a culture that enables emotional safety. And it's really difficult to even have, and I've trained hundreds of schools, and there's some fantastic, they are fantastic, incredible staff that maybe we'll have on the podcast over the years, but doing incredible things and creating, rooms and therapeutic rooms which are so emotionally safe and beautiful. But if that's happening, but the culture of the whole school is one which is authoritarian and punitive and uses isolation rooms and, rewards for even school attendance, that kind of thing, it kind of clashes. So the culture is in conflict with itself. And so huge admiration for those people that are leading those nurture rooms or therapeutic rooms, whatever they are. Incredible work, phenomenal work. But they're very much like fish swimming the opposite against the tide, which is hard work. So for me, a trauma-informed, trauma-sensitive culture is that everybody has the buy-in for that, right from the leadership setting the tone, that we are human-centered, we care for humans. And that doesn't mean we don't have discipline, but it means it's relational discipline. So we have conversations around, look, you just hurt another person. I'm wondering how that person feels, and I'm wondering how we can repair. I'm wondering what we can do, because how would you feel? It's that kind of culture. That's the foundation. When that's in place, people can begin to carry the lens of trauma recovery? How can we help people actually recover from what they've experienced?
I love that thought of recovery, because it's kind of almost like trauma stops you in its tracks, doesn't it? Or like, I mean, I'm saying this to you, you know, because you taught me, but like how you can freeze and how you can get trapped in the kind of grip of fear. But recovery, it's kind of got that momentum forward again, I guess. And that's seemingly what society needs right now, because if we just turn on the news or think about the pandemic, there seems to be, it seems so rife. So how could people understand recovery?
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
Yeah, lots of thoughts again. Lots of thoughts. I might have written a whole book on it. I forgot and I saw it. Lots of thoughts. I guess, in a nutshell, I think trauma recovery starts with understanding what humans need to function well. Arguably, I would say trauma-informed does as well. What is it a human needs? What are our basic needs? What are our relational needs? What are our needs in community, rather than just as an individual, because we're not really designed to fit as an individual. Like how are we meant to be as a community, and what is a healthy community that enables every individual person to flourish? And how can you lead that community in a way that empowers people and isn't authoritarian or dictatorial? You know, it's not I can't say it.
A dictatorship?
Dictatorship, that's the word.
I have no idea.
Dictatorial. I'm not sure. You can let me know. Authoritarian. I'm sticking to that word. Yeah. It's not authoritarian. It's not I'm telling you what to do. It's more, how can we co-create this space where each individual person, who's all unique and individual, how can you all flourish? Which I would argue starts in a home. I've tried to do that in a home with my family, who are all vastly different to each other. Very different. How can we create a home where each other's hobbies actually don't push the other hobby out? Yeah, you know, one son plays the drums. How does that help with another son that needs silence? How do you do that in a home? And then how do you do that in an organisation, such as a school or any other organisation? And it takes leadership. It takes strategy. It takes thought. It takes attention. And it takes respecting each individual person and their unique giftings and their unique weaknesses and their unique fragility to be able to put that together, which takes a lot of effort, but is stunning when it works. So trauma recovery for me is entirely about individuals being accepted, acknowledged, and rather than people being stuck going, well, that happened to me, so now I'm always going to be like that. So did you know that our brains are highly malleable? Who knew? We don't have to get stuck at that. Even things like triggers. People talk about triggers all the time. It's like, well, that's a trigger for me. Well, it doesn't have to be for the rest of your life. There are ways of reducing the pain of a trigger until you just acknowledge it and go, God, that used to make me feel awful. Now I just don't like it.
Yeah, wow. Do you think people know that?
No, I don't think they do. And I did 10 years ago until, you know, I've trained about 40,000 people and a lot of people have said they didn't know this.
Yeah.
But yet we know so much now about the brain. We've got these neuroscientists working in labs everywhere telling us increasing amounts. I had an MRI scan. I could see things in my head.
Wow.
Like, it's really exciting. We know so much more now, and we totally know that repetition causes neural pathways, and we know that we can reverse things with enough repetition. We know our brains are highly malleable. So we can desensitize triggers all the way from being something that causes phobia and high levels of anxiety and avoidance to, I'm acknowledging that, I recognize that causes me pain, but it's beginning to be a little bit less pain because I know what I can do. I'm empowered to do something about it. And I recognize that the trigger is in the past, and now I'm not that age, so now I can do this.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, such good, hopeful news, isn't it?
Well, I think so, yeah. And of course, you look after the data with them. I'm not sure if that's a really big word, but you do. You essentially look after the data for our trauma recovery centres. So you've had the job. Tell us about what you've done with that.
Well, So I guess we collect data for a couple of reasons. At TRC, it's to help see the progress. So it's like assessing clinically where people's symptoms are at when they come in. And then we do it at the beginning of therapy, but we do it across the course of therapy, and then we do it at the end. And it's really to help the therapist know where they're up to in terms of assessing, okay, have we worked on that area? But we can also use it to influence and create an evidence base for what we're doing that is working, so that we can hopefully get more funding for it and actually help more kids and be able to say, no, this does work. So that's kind of why we collect data.
Yeah.
Also, as a charity, we have to evidence to all our grant funders and everything.
Yeah.
But I guess the dream would be to influence policy, wouldn't it? To be able to say, can we put more funding in for this? Especially when you look at the stats of our criminal justice system and people in our prisons who are reporting unprocessed childhood trauma, and our adult mental health system. So we know that it could have a huge impact. I guess what your skill set though is being able to put that into different sectors, as well as training kind of therapists. I've noticed that you're good at trying to bring that into different sectors. So if we stayed with schools, which I think you've kind of mentioned about a bit, I wonder for anyone, maybe any head teacher who's listening, who wants a practical of, okay, how could I find out more? I mean, I guess you have a book sat right in front of you. But is there anything that you would say to them at this point in time, which is a difficult time post-COVID and, with all the pressures for schools right now?
There's a lot I would like to say at that point. First of all, I think head teachers are amazing. And I'm actually doing a doctorate at the moment, excuse me, in leadership, because we've got a crisis of leaders. There's a crisis of recruitment for leaders, because I've been leading charities for 25 years, but in the last 10 years, the level of governance is extreme. It's extreme, absolutely extreme. So it makes every decision very difficult, because we're doing it on so many different levels. The fast answer to help schools, and maybe we can do another whole podcast, whole half an hour. It's not very long, is it? I do whole day trainings on this.
Long.
Whole day training on schools. But in a few minutes, I'd say culture is everything.
Right.
So when I train a school who is really committed to having a trauma-informed, trauma-sensitive, and wearing trauma recovery glasses for those people that are working one-on-one with children who are traumatized, that culture, I would say usually from kind of an average school could take a year to build. And it starts with, I would usually do my stage 1 training, which is a whole school day, so it's an inset day, but I always say I can't do it unless I have everybody there. I want all the governors, I want the people that work in the gardens, I want the people that work in the kitchens, I want the people that work in the offices, I want all the cleaners, everybody, because the culture has to be carried by everybody. And it's one that helps them feel empowered and hopeful, and they feel like they're taking part. Everybody's playing their part in building a culture of hope, that no matter what the child is living through, no matter what they're navigating, no matter what symptoms they have, which are internalized or externalized, and therefore if they're really difficult to manage by other people, or whether actually it's all on the inside and it's internalized, and you just see these vacant or anxious children that seem to be stuck in their own worlds, internalized, externalized, there's hope for them. And then, of course, I've got all sorts of other projects, like therapeutic mentoring rooms in schools, where we basically help a school look after an entire room with sofas and specialised kitting, and the most traumatised children are given an assessment and a treatment plan by one of my team, which a therapeutic mentor who's done my 10-day course carries out within the school. Every day, it can be 3 times a day, and the child can access that space when they need it. Whereas things like therapy for 1 hour a week within a school, brilliant, amazing, but it's not every day. And a traumatized child needs a safe place to go to, so they can co-regulate with an adult, and they can They know there's a safe place. There's really no shortcut for that at all, I think. Adult, teenage children, little children, all ages. It's a bit like a staff room should be for the teachers. I used to love a staff room. I was a teacher. I loved dunking a hobnob into a cup of tea when I was having a bad day. And the rest of the time, the biscuit tin was totally untouched. But on a bad day, when you just felt like you just didn't know what to do, because there were so many needs of so many children, and all the parents were needing your attention and time as well.
Yeah.
The staff room was somewhere where you had the collaborative sense of we're in this together because we really care for families.
Yeah.
We care for these children. And so the cup of tea was very soothing. So I believe we can completely change cultures of schools. Having said that, I'm really, really recognising that there's never been a time that's more difficult for school leaders and for teachers. And if I'm really, really honest, to teach some curriculum that I think is entirely, utterly irrelevant and doesn't adhere to any sense of understanding of child development. Now, that's not the teacher's fault. They're doing what they have to. That's often not the head's fault. They're doing what they have to. But it's someone somewhere has decided that children, rather than writing stories that are full of imagination and creativity in year 1 and 2, are learning how the stories are functioned. I mean, I'm really honest. I've written about 14 books, and I'm not sure I could actually pass English SATs.
Yeah, wow.
I actually am not sure.
No, because the language has changed completely since I was at school as well. Yeah.
I love writing. Writing's been my hobby since I was a kid.
Yeah,
but I think it might have stopped me at a young age. So it's things like that. It's not the head's fault. It's not the teacher's fault. There's someone somewhere with a system that is fighting for something that I actually think is crippling a sense of the innocence of childhood and the creativity that we know is like a lifeblood for people. They need creativity. It's the foundation for children's well-being is art, creativity and play. That's not you can have a break time now. Children under 11 should be primarily learning through play, primarily learning through creativity. We know that. There's been evidence for decades on it. So I'm not sure quite what's happened in the last 10 years in the education system, but it's really tough because to do a trauma-informed, to create a trauma-informed culture in a school when the curriculum isn't wildly trauma-informed is a dilemma.
Yeah.
So we need to change the whole system, really.
And for just anyone who's listening who might be completely new to trauma, if a child is in a school setting who has gone through trauma, how does that impact them within the school setting? Like, what does that what are the practical impact symptoms, I guess?
Well, if a child has experienced type 1 trauma where they can talk about it, a single incident trauma, they might well run up to you in a primary school and go, you wouldn't believe it, but we were in a car crash. My mum and dad are divorcing. We're moving house. My rabbit died. They might well tell you. In secondary school, they might tell you, but not like that. Because usually there's words. And if they don't tell you, they'll tell their friends, and their friends might tell the teacher. Not always, but often there are words. And so for those children, they need time to talk about that, and then it impacts them less. In type 2 and 3 trauma, where they're stuck in settings that they really are struggling to get out of, usually that's what we call interpersonal trauma, where the very people that are meant to be looking after the children are actually instead not. So either emotional neglect, which we recognise from neuroscience is actually arguably more damaging to a child than abuse even, and that's a difficult subject to think about. I've written a book on emotional neglect because of the level of damage it has for a child. And really what I mean by emotional neglect is not enough emotional connection from the adult to the child, so not enough attunement of the face, not enough quality time playing and having fun and creating together. The child can feel so isolated and abandoned that it actually causes change to the nervous system that stays on alert for signs of danger because they don't relax into that attachment figure. Or abuse and things like abuse, continual potential for ongoing stress and pain and terror. For those children, what was the question? I've totally forgotten.
For just anyone who doesn't
We
know
need to
about
write down
trauma,
the
how it
questions.
impacts.
Right, how does it impact
in the school
So
setting?
for type 2, I knew I'd forget something. I am perimenopausal. It's very hard. I need to write the questions down, but they come so naturally from you, which I am enjoying.
Just in conversation. Yeah.
Impact. Okay, impact. Type 2 and 3 trauma, you're either going to go into the hyper stuff, the hyper behaviours. So that would be the aggression, the agitation, the ants in their pants, they can't sit still, the needing to get it out in some way. So running through the corridors, hitting people, just like, because it just needs to come out because they feel all this stuff on the inside, in which case you can see it really easily. But very often they're described as naughty or not paying attention or, why can't they focus? Those are all signs, they're symptoms to me of distress.
Yeah.
I'm not excusing behaviour. I am saying they're symptoms of distress, though. And then the lower end, the hypoarousal, is more they're internalised, they're not speaking a lot, or if they are, they're a little bit dazed or glazed over. They're possibly dissociative, they're possibly in their own world, or they might be self-harming to get themselves out of that numb state where they can feel again because they feel so stuck. So usually it's one or the other, or they're zigzagging from one to another just to try and stay on the planet, really. And those are classic symptoms, very oversimplified, but classic symptoms of what I would call symptoms of distress. Distress being the main symptom of trauma.
Yeah.
I am distressed because I was terrified, powerless, and overwhelmed. And now my nervous system, my body, my mind, and my emotions don't know how to process that without an adult. And that's leading me to struggle with relationships and struggling to learn and think because my prefrontal cortex, which needs to take in this random abstract information that I'd love to know if I was calm enough, is going right over my head.
Yeah.
And I can't take it in because at the moment my primary occupation is how am I going to keep going?
Yeah. Which makes school really hard.
Yeah.
When the two main things are learning and relationships within the school setting. So that's a massive challenge for teachers who aren't necessarily trained in it.
But they can become emotionally safe teachers.
Yeah.
And schools can become emotionally safe places. Even if the curriculum isn't wildly emotionally safe, if they've got somewhere to go to where if they're not feeling safe, they're suddenly feeling frightened or triggered or overwhelmed or scared because they can't quite get their brain to work because they're just wondering if they've got any food when they go home, or are they going to have to look after their baby brothers and sisters because mum's still working, and they've got all these worries in their head and they can't quite get them out, and they're desperately trying to listen to the teacher, but they can't get it out of their head. If at that point they could go, do you know what, I'm just going to go and see Mrs. Scott because she'll just give me some orange juice and sit me down. And I know I'll just be able to sit there. I don't even have to tell her what's happening. I can just go, I'm just not okay. And Mrs. Scott will know what to do because Mrs. Scott's there for me and she knows what sensory things help. She knows how to help me calm my breathing down. She knows how to just make me feel like I'm not on my own. And then after a while, I want to go back and learn because I wanted to learn anyway. I just couldn't quite think because my head was all stuck with worries. That's a trauma-informed school.
Yeah, I love that.
Was that it?
I think
is that our 30 minutes?
Half an hour, yeah. It's hard to stick to half an hour. That went really fast.
It's also hard to remember the questions you ask because I go off on all these different spaces. But I'm okay with that. I actually don't have shame about that.
No.
Just thought I'd mention it.
No.
I really don't. I think we should normalise that if you're overwhelmed, very busy, or you're perimenopausal, they're 3 good reasons.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes you just go off on a thought and you can't remember where you were coming back to.
And even if you had none of those things and you forgot.
It's true. It's just being a human, right?
Completely fine.
Very true. Right, are we done?
Yes.
That was the end of podcast 2 of either How to Recover from Trauma or Trauma Recovery is Possible. Maybe vote. Tell us which one you think's the best. Thanks for joining us. Bye.